At this point in time, it is my great pleasure to introduce Betsy Bair as the moderator of this wonderful panel.
Thank you, Francis. Am I on?
Hello? I think I turned it on. Oh, there I am.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Betsy Bair, and I'm Director of Content and Editorial for MeetingsNet, Penton Publishing. Tell you a little bit about what I do, and then I'm going to ask each of our panelists to tell you a little bit about themselves, and then I'll talk about the format for the morning. We publish several magazines for meeting professionals, corporate meetings and incentives, medical meetings, association meetings, and Religious Conference Manager magazine. We also have MeetingsNet.com, which is our website, and we do educational webinars for meeting professionals and a lot of other products other than just print magazines nowadays. So I'm so excited to be here. I would like to mention that Corporate Meetings and Incentives every year does a list of the top 25 independent meeting and incentive management companies in North America. And our esteemed panelists each represent companies that are always on that list. And that list changes a little bit every year, and we'll hear a little bit about that in a minute when Steve introduces himself. But I would like to turn things over and ask Steve O'Malley to introduce himself, and then Faye Beauchine and MacGregor.
Great. Thanks, Betsy. So I'm Steve O'Malley. I think my title up there is probably 3 weeks old. It's changed a little bit with the news that came out about 2 weeks ago that Maritz has acquired Experience. So now I have responsibility for our Maxvantage strategic alliance between Maritz Travel and American Express, serving the strategic meetings management market. And I also have overarching responsibility now for the Experience business unit as part of Maritz Travel Company, working to integrate that into what will become the Maritz Travel platform as we go forward. So good morning to everybody. Thanks for having us.
Hello, I'm Faye Beauchine, and I'm president of AIMIA U.S. region. And this is a company that has experience in loyalty management and marketing services. You may have known us as Carlson Marketing in years past, and we recently rebranded to the company named AIMIA. So we're a large global company. We're in 34 countries. We have about 3,800 employees. And I'll focus today mainly on my comments on the experience on the U.S. market, where we practice employee, channel, and customer loyalty.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mary MacGregor. I'm the Vice President of Account Development for BCD M&I. BCD M&I is a part of the BCD Holdings family. We operate meetings and events in 30 countries. My role is primarily U.S.-based. I am responsible for our sales function and our client relationship management. I also have the privilege of serving as Site's Global President last year actually my colleague Steve was the president of the foundation last year. I was president of Site Global. I still remain on the global board this year as immediate past president, but am thrilled to be here, and thank you all for your participation today and your support of Site.
Thank you. So how will the next hour or so look? Well, Site International Foundation has done some very groundbreaking research, I think, on the views of both qualifiers and non-qualifiers of group travel incentive programs. And so after each of the panelists dives a little bit deeper into the three parts of the study, we're going to bring it back down to what everyone in this room is interested in, how it affects us in terms of trends. Well, certainly I'm going to ask questions, but we welcome questions from the audience as well. And we do plan to talk about the GSA scandal, but we're going to kind of leave that toward the end of the session and try to get our panelists' views on that as well. So, Steve, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Great. So we definitely want this to be interactive. So as we're going through it, if there's a concept that you'd like to comment on, have an additional question on, please let us know. We will ask you to take the mic, I guess, because this is being taped. We want to make sure that we get the questions on the record as well. And plenty of time for question and answers. This is not going to be us simply spewing to you, I promise you. But we want to focus on some research that we executed last year. It was taking a look from the participant's viewpoint at what incentive travel has become, and really with an eye toward how do they view it now after in a post-recession era. So we when you look at incentive travel as it is, it really is a business asset. It's an investment. It can be used for employee engagement. It can be used for recognition. It can be used to drive performance short-term and long-term. And we, as an industry, need to view it as just that. It's no longer just the trip fulfillment. It's not just about the destination and the hotel. It needs to be about driving business performance. And one of the ways that we believe that you do that is by focusing on how it impacts and affects the individual who's participating. And my eyes are not that good, but I'm going to put these up. Really, this is about, as much as anything, it's about employee engagement as well. If you look at some recent studies, PwC said that 95% of executives are concerned about retaining their key employees. Critical now, I actually see in our industry with some of the recent announcements, people in very high-level jobs taking positions elsewhere. I think the labor market has finally tightened up in our industry enough where we're going to see that people are out looking and they're going to be able to find positions because the industry itself is growing. 47% of top performers are currently looking for a job. It's a pretty scary thought. You've got your best people who are saying, hey, this has been a rough 3 or however many years. What else might be out there for me? And 1 in 3 employees are feeling dissatisfied and disloyal. That's a really discouraging thing. Now, the great news is when incentive travel is applied correctly, we can change all of those things, all of those statistics into our favor. So in the past, when we've looked at incentive travel, we've surveyed to death both buyers and sellers of incentive travel. So we know exactly what, I guess, hoteliers as a group think about incentive travel and what they believe is most motivating. We've tried to, probably with less success, select the buyers of incentive travel, the actual end corporate buyers, in order to get their view, because that's critical to anybody that's either in the end supplier or in the intermediary position to understand what is motivating them. But we've been missing something that's critically important, and that really is the participant. This is all about influencing the emotions, the human behavior of the people that are enrolled in these programs. So what Site Foundation did last year was commission a study that we did in conjunction with the Incentive Travel Council and in conjunction with Monmouth University, Dr. Scott Jeffrey, who is a renowned scholar when it comes to motivation and incentives. And we put together a survey, and it went out to 6,000 individuals. We have 1,000 respondents. So the data that we're talking about today is incredibly powerful, and actually you can use it as directional. It's statistically significant. So what we wanted to do was find out what was really meaningful, what was motivational, and then what was memorable about incentive travel from the participant standpoint. And as Betsy mentioned, that's both from the people who earn it as well as those who didn't earn it. We found that we felt like that was going to be a critical component to see, are the people getting turned off, those that don't earn it? And we have some statistics to share around that. We're actually doing a really good job when it comes to that. So as I said, this has been broken down, and I think each of us are going to take on a different pillar of the results around meaningful, motivational, and memorable, and tell you a little bit deeper into the results that we found. And I'm going to start that off by really talking about meaningful. And by meaningful, I want to make sure that we understand that is really, are the goals clearly defined? Are they fair and attainable? And is there effective communication going on around what those goals are and your progress toward those? What we found was that we're doing a really good job here. 77% of the people that responded said, yes, I believe I understand what the goal is, it's clearly defined, and I think I have a shot at getting there. So that's really good news for the companies that are using this. They're doing a great job in setting a target that people understand and feel like, yes, I've got a shot at doing that. I think where, in addition to that, if I could see this clearly, so the other part of this is, do I think it's achievable? Thank you. Is it attainable? So not only do they understand where it's going, but they actually believe they have a shot at getting there, which is critical, because even if they understand the goal but they feel like it's out of reach, they will immediately shut off. So good story around that relative to how the industry is performing. Where I think we have vast room for improvement here. 39% of the respondents said they're not getting effective and regular enough communication about how they're progressing toward their objectives. So, it's kind of like the tree falling in the forest and no one's around. Does it make a noise? There's huge investments being put against this. We as an industry need to get better at keeping that engagement level throughout the incentive campaign. And that's really simple stuff that we can do. I mean, think about how social media has just taken off in the past few years. We can add a portion of social media to our communications campaign and have people ping out there to understand what they're doing. This is really simple stuff, but I actually think that we need to look at even the communications campaign around an incentive, whether it's a 12-month or a 3-month or whatever, as an ongoing opportunity for engagement and an ongoing opportunity to tie not only this program, but the individuals back to the core values and business objectives that the company has. So immediate things that can be done. Hold company meetings when you have company town halls, et cetera. Make sure that this is part of the messaging. Make sure that people understand this campaign's going on, here are how people are progressing, and make sure that the executives are, when they're out talking with their individual employees that are working through this, that this is a focus of part of the conversation. By simply talking about it, we're showing that it has great importance to the company, great importance to the executive. So really simple fixes around this, but it's critical in order to maximize the investment that we're putting against this effort. Mary?
Great. So when we talk a little bit and look at what the participant feedback was with regards to the motivational aspect, a couple of things first to tee up. I mean, this is the segment of the research that really addressed the question, what is it that I'm willing to work really hard to achieve? So what am I going to work really hard for? And so initially there were some validations around the important aspects of an incentive travel program that do motivate them. And so rounding out the top of that list were things that anecdotally we've all kind of believed to be the case, and this study actually validated. So 60% of the participants said that they really valued the opportunity to interact with the high-level executives. 72% said that they really liked the opportunity to build relationships outside of a work environment with their peers. That was an important aspect, and that was motivational for them to be able to earn the right to be in that environment. They all said, and probably the two highest things that came out were that they really value the unique experience. So it's making sure, as all of us are involved in some aspect of the incentive travel programming, that whole notion of what can I do on this travel program that I can't do on my own? What's the unique aspect? What's that surprise and delight element that I can't do by myself? That's a key aspect that motivates the participants. And also just across the board, there was validation that they really value the recognition aspect of achieving an incentive travel program. If we look at the next slide, we asked sort of what are the triggers of what you're looking for when you go on an incentive travel program, and some, again, of the higher rated or higher noted aspects were, across the board, over 70% said that they'd like fewer mandated functions. And we've seen that change, right? So we've seen kind of less of the standard programming where everyone went on the tour together, everyone did that. And sort of, the other thing is then that leads into, again, really high feedback on, I'd like more time on my own. I'd like more free time to be able to select what it is that I'm interested in and passionate about seeing within the destination. And then they also said from a feedback perspective that they really like being asked about the destination choice, and they like having it switched up. So this whole notion as companies who plan incentives, many of our clients look to switch it up. They might do a fun and sun destination one year, Europe another, cruise a third. So that still resonates strongly for their participants. They like the idea of kind of that being switched up. A couple other interesting things that came out of the motivational aspect that I just want to comment on, and one is to kind of segue additionally from Steve's comment about communication. And not only do they want more clear communication about the rule structure, but they'd like more communication about the destination and what they're going to experience so that they really can plan ahead and create the vision about the experience. So that's another thing from a communication aspect to keep in mind. And it was another thing that was interesting is there was a specific question asked about all-inclusives and whether or not that was a motivating factor that the ultimate trip was an all-inclusive experience. And it was very kind of marginal to low response. So I think that would tell us a couple of things. Number one, if you're an all-inclusive product, maybe there's more work to do just in terms of educating the participants and buyers about the experience. And secondly, is it the participants who are driving that choice, or is it the planners and the budget that's driving the choice? So maybe some more for those of you who have an all-inclusive product. Just I think that was just sort of an interesting scenario that there was really kind of a no comment or no real feel about that. So a couple of interesting things. Faye?
Okay, well, being from Minneapolis, I'd like to relate this next section of research to Todd Beamer, who was the gentleman and the American hero on United Flight 93, who wrestled the hijackers to the ground of the aircraft and prevented that airplane from crashing into the White House. His wife, Lisa Beamer, wrote a book, and she dedicated a chapter to the memory of the incentive trip they had taken the week before that experience. And they had gone to Hawaii, and she talks about the impact of that trip on her and her husband because he worked so hard to achieve the award. She talked about standing on the beach and looking at the ocean with him. And so we know in this industry intuitively that memorable experiences as part of the motivational award impact people the rest of their lives. And what we didn't know in the industry was how exactly until this real groundbreaking research came through from SITE, which told you what parts of the program can really produce those memorable events and make it long-lasting and have an impact on the human being. So long that it lasts for a lifetime. And probably all of you have heard this, that incentive programs have changed people for a lifetime. So let me just take you through 2 slides that discuss the intensity of the award on the participants, and then also the impact of the award. So the purpose of this piece of research was to understand how engaging experiences result in short-term and long-term value, both for the participant themselves and then for the corporate sponsor or the organization. So this study looks at a few things, and let's get onto the next slide. Okay, it looks at the executive interaction that happened on the program and how meaningful that is, the uniqueness of the experience, the peer relationships, and then recognition in general. And again, it talks about the participants' viewpoint and also the impact on the organization. So the most demonstrable outcome of this piece of research is that the peer recognition of being on the program and being recognized by your corporation had by far the strongest impact. And when a number of us all study our own clients quite a bit, and it's not just being recognized for that winning value, but being on the stage at the event and being recognized long after, and even those who didn't make the trip being recognized possibly for being nominated for the trip, and how a company carries through these recognition practices before, during, and after the event. The second most valuable part of this research was the peer relationships that an individual can establish by being on the program, and how memorable some of those peer relationships become over time and how helpful they are in doing their work in the future. And then the unique experiences, and many of the people here in this audience today really understand this point about how unique it must be and how an individual who wins the award cannot replicate this experience on their own easily for any amount of money, because they can't replicate the group experience, they can't replicate the tingle and the excitement of the moment when they hear the bagpipe playing in the Scottish castle. They just can't do that on their own. So we all understand that. And then the last is executive interaction on the trip. And corporations and individuals answer this question quite differently, depending on the culture and depending on the practice and depending on what executives come on the program. But in general, it's very important for executives to show up at programs and to recognize. So just a couple of high-level results from this study. 88.6% of those who earned the reward agreed that they felt very appreciated by their host company. So that's a very, very strong statistic, and that an individual will say that. 73% of the earners reported an increased feeling of loyalty toward the company, and that loyalty does translate usually into future increased productivity for the organization. And 77% of the award earners said that earning the award increased their feeling of being part of the company. So when you look at this slide and you see the middle section which says loyalty, trust, belongingness, it means, are you committed? Do you feel committed to your company? Do you trust your company? And do you feel aligned with the company's business objectives because this incentive program was offered to you and you earned it? And the answer to that resoundingly is yes. It's one of the strongest tools in the market that produces those kinds of alignment. And that's what we mean by long-term value of an incentive program. Not just the short term, I had a great time, I can come home and boast to my neighbors and feel very proud of that achievement, but I have a long-term alignment and trust in my organization because they offered to do this for me. And so when we're talking to corporations who are considering, should I have incentive travel programs as part of my toolkit or my arsenal to help motivate my employees, the answer is a resounding yes, because there is clear evidence now with this site study that this builds trust, alignment, and commitment and a sense of belongingness to the corporation. And that keeps employees at a corporation, and it keeps retention strong. Steve's opening point about people are shopping and about half of top performers are looking to go elsewhere. They don't if they are treated to incentive programs that are run properly. Okay, we'll look at the second slide. One of the things we found out in the study as we measured the intensity of the event or of a particular part of a program versus its emotional impact is that CSR programs, as they are often conducted, don't have the impact that we thought they had, and team building exercises may not have the impact that we thought they did, especially if a whole day is taken out of a program to conduct, to go to work. And this is a point that SITE wants to study more in the future, because prior to this, there was a prevailing thought that CSR activities were absolutely essential and critical to build motivation on these programs. So now we know they really aren't. And this study was done with over 1,000 participants, and that's a very good sample to help us understand this. So what can companies do here to still align their employees on these programs with their company causes? Well, that's really the answer, is if you have a properly designed activity that really aligns with your corporate brand and is really part of what you've been practicing every day at your corporation, then it will have an impact. But when you just pick a CSR activity in a location because it happens to be the thing going on there, it doesn't have an impact and it doesn't translate into the emotional value that you think it would. So there's much more to read about this particular point, but we found that a significant new learning. So we have to study how to do this better in the future in the design and the delivery of incentive programs. Okay. So in creating a great program, the things to consider, it's pretty simple. Along the horizontal axis, you have to consider the participants' needs and really what they're thinking. And to do this, companies really need to get data on their participants. They must research their points of view all the time so that they understand exactly how they're changing and how they deliver. And if they do, they get a winning situation. If they don't do that and just apply the corporate objectives without combining the participants' point of view, you can have a win-lose situation, the lower right-hand quadrant of this. Likewise, if a company only wants to focus on its objectives and is not going to take into account frequently its participants' point of view, you can have a win-lose in the upper left-hand quadrant. And of course, the ideal is to balance the participant point of view with the company's objectives, both short and long term, and create that win-win situation. And that takes getting the data, studying the data, and creating insights that really help people design good programs. Okay, next slide. So this is called a word cloud. And this is a great way to depict data in a more meaningful, easy to understand way. And that is, instead of giving you a bunch of numbers, we're giving you the words that the numbers translate to, or the insight. And it shows that trust and loyalty and the length of trip and the amount of free leisure time, as Mary talked about, are really, really important aspects in the design of a program. And if we don't listen to these and we don't have fair rule structures for programs, they just may not be as strong as you think they'll be as a corporation. And so it's pretty clear on this what the strong characteristics of a program are. Now, where do I find out more about what Mary, Steve, and I have been talking about? It is really going to the site global.org website, where these studies are delineated in great detail. There are some paper copies available of these studies. However, we urge you to be green and just go download it on your computer and study it there. But this is free to members. Get a first look at the research. Later, the general public has access to all of our research. And the reason we have such good research is we have sponsors that help us conduct this research. Okay? Now, where does our research emanate from? It emanates from a panel that is the largest, most comprehensive global panel, because we have over 60 countries participating in our research, which means that the research we put out is not American-centric, it is global-centric. And it's important for corporations because all of our corporations run global programs. So when they look at this data, they can draw conclusions that are accurate for global audiences. And if you are not a member of the site index, all of you, including listeners online, and all of you are eligible to become a member. You go to site and there's a process for you to enroll in the panel, because you're experts in this business and your opinion should be engaged on the panel.
If I just might add also anecdotally, this particular research is designed to really be utilized and really impact business decisions in a really relevant and timely way. I hear from people all over the world on how they use the research. They take it into client meetings when they're talking particularly here about program design. Many of our colleagues are required by their organizations to submit whether it's monthly or quarterly trend updates. Where's the industry heading? What are the relevant topics, and how are we going to impact our business decisions? And they're using this research for that. So really, don't think of it as just interesting information, but really think about how you can take it and translate it into a business tool for you, because that's when I think it's most impactful.
And Mary, if I could just add to that, I would also ask, if you have an idea, if you have an issue that you'd like for us to research, please send us those requests. We're constantly looking for topical information to go out and take a look at through the panel. The Site Foundation's Research Committee is active. We do anywhere between 4 and 6 site index small studies each year, as opposed to a very large undertaking like this. And they're very topical. It's we have one in the field right now around buyer sentiments. So as these ideas or issues come up, please let us know through the siteglobal.org website, and we are always looking for research ideas that help the industry and help you.
Okay. And finally, I'll just talk about the 3 events that Site sponsors, and these are all 3 fundraising events that raise the dollars that pay for the research we just talked about. And they're very, very important because it accomplishes 2 things. Not only do we raise dollars and euro to pay for the research, we also provide networking opportunities at these 3 events. And those networking opportunities are very strong because all the players in the business attend this. So the first one is Site Night in Europe, which is coming up at IMEX, and that is Monday, May 21st. And then the Site Classic, which is the annual fundraising golf tournament where all the proceeds go to research, is being held in Aspen this year. And we really encourage your attendance and support of that event. And it will be a sellout. People sign up for this very quickly. And then Site Night North America takes place in conjunction with and is the night before the opening of the large IMEX show in Las Vegas, which is the preeminent trading place now for incentives and event travel in Las Vegas. So we encourage your attendance and support of these events.
I just also might add that another area that the Site Foundation does fund, because their tenet and their real focus is research and education, and that last year we were able to work in partnership to launch an education endowment for our chapters. So I believe that Site Florida took part in that and submitted a proposal so that through the foundation received funding to help support education, relevant speakers, just a key event. And that will be an ongoing annual program. It was really well received and very positive feedback. So again, we're looking not only to create the tools from a research standpoint, but then also making it relevant on how you as a chapter can really use it to impact your own events.
Great. I'm going to kick things off with a question and a comment about the corporate social responsibility piece. I found that so interesting because it really has been a big trend, I'd say ever since the AIG effect, that many companies and corporations want to incorporate a CSR event in order to give back to the community, do a feel-good. We at Medical Meetings sponsor a pharmaceutical meeting management forum for meeting planners. We did it in Orlando a few weeks ago. We did our first CSR event, and it was with Clean the World. I'm not sure that you're all familiar with it, but it was a great tie-in, I thought, to our theme and mission, because it's hotels who take the recycled soap and recycle it in plants in Orlando and Las Vegas and ship it off to third world countries and save lives of children who have very poor hygiene. So the tie-in for both the meeting professionals who can request it at their event and the hoteliers who were there, and Orlando just happens to have a facility. So it was meaningful. I think people remembered it, and it was also a team-building experience. It certainly wasn't mandatory, but we also had a panel of these 3 nonprofits saying, please, please don't stop doing CSR events. We can figure out together how to make it more meaningful for your attendees. Faye, do you want to speak a little bit more to that?
I think we're not saying that CSR events aren't meaningful, because they certainly are. We're saying that the research showed that not in all cases do they have a great impact on the participant. And it depends on how well aligned. Your event sounds like it was very well aligned with your corporate social responsibility goals. It depends on how well aligned. I think what we are saying that if you just choose an event in a destination and take people out to do team building at a CSR activity that they can't relate to, then it isn't very impactful. What we're saying is think through this process or make the whole event itself an eco experience, for example. We had experience with one of our clients in creating a very green event from beginning to end, and throughout the entire time, the participants were notified at how green they were being by being together. There wasn't a shred of paper there, and all the foods were local and natural and so on. And at the end, they rated it very high because they felt they were part of an eco experience and a give back to the community experience. In another one, for example, in South Africa, the items used at the final night event were all made by a local village around and provided employment for three months for that village. And that was well known to the participants that they were contributing to the economy and they were enjoying some of the clothing and things made for them for that event. That's what we mean is the connection has to be strong with the community that it's in or with the corporate goals and the brand. You just can't do one for the sake of doing one because people just won't have the impact for it. So they're good to do. It's how they're done and it's with what frequency. And there just has to be a lot of thinking and planning around it. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to help our clients and to help corporations think through what they're doing and match up what you have locally to offer with what their real values are.
Can you speak a little bit to the team building effect? Sure. Now, the short-term impact was there, but not long-term. Do you have any tips, any of you, for perhaps improving our team building exercises?
Anyone want to go first? I'll comment, but I'll let someone else speak first.
Well, I think that what we've seen is the trend towards team building and CSR kind of merging, so that a team building event is typically incorporating that CSR. I think that it really resonates with the points that Faye made. So it's whether or not it has to be meaningful and relevant, and I think the randomness of some of the programming is really something that we should, as professionals, kind of take a step back and really examine. I think that there are really good examples of how a team building event or a CSR event absolutely makes sense and aligns with the corporate vision and goals. I'll give an example. We've got one of our clients who, as a corporation, they do a significant amount of work with the Red Cross. So every year, the destination that they hold their incentive, they look to do something to give back to the local Red Cross. The participants know that, they understand it, they feel good about it, and it's actually become an indelible part of that incentive travel experience. So I think that those are the kinds of things that I would suggest we kind of look towards, as we're planning professionals. The other suggestion, and I know I meet with suppliers and hotels and destination management companies all the time, and one of the things they'll always ask is, how can we be a better partner? How can we be more strategic? So my suggestion to them is, if you know who the client is, do your homework and go to the website, understand where they put their value as an organization, and in your proposals or in your recommendations, show how you can, whether it's in your hotel, whether it's in your destination, reinforce what they publicly state as their mission to giving back in some way. So I think that's a way that you also can do value add and hopefully differentiate yourself.
You go, and then I'll go.
Okay, great. So what I would also say is that, I think a lot of what we found as a result of this research was that whether it was CSR or team building, it was simply a bolt-on. It didn't fit in. It wasn't part of the theme or brand, if you will, of the company. So it has to make sense. It has to be part of what the company is trying to achieve, and even how you structure it. You know, just like any strategy can work as long as everybody believes in it and gets behind it, I think any CSR or team building event can work if it's aligned to the brand. I mean, we have a good example of a company that they felt like that there was just unhealthy competition between the regions. And what they wanted to do, and they stated that we want to be one company. So as part of a team building exercise, and this happened to be, you know, sounds really funny. It was hilarious to watch the video of it. It was a bunch of tennis balls dropped into the ocean and used for essentially crossword puzzles on the beach. So, you know, we had 300 people diving into the ocean to go get these tennis balls and do these crossword puzzles. It was, you know, a frantic thing, but there was thought put behind it relative to, you're not simply going to get together with your friends, your regional department. Instead, we interspersed the 4 teams with various people from different parts of the organization in order to really live into this, we want to be one company. That memorability of that experience really added to the effect of breaking down the barriers between the regions and making the company show up more as one. So, you know, I think, you know, for our entire industry, we need to be thinking back again from the company back. What does the company's brand stand for? What is the company's objectives in this year for this year? And then we can build the right activities, whether it's team building or anything else, and the right agenda around that. And it does come down to, you know, the individuals. How are we going to affect change with regard to how we're putting this agenda together? So, you know, if we can just do that instead of simply taking out, you know, the standard thing from our playbook, then we're going to improve the view of this as a tool for corporations to use to improve performance.
I have one final thought on team building that's both for CSR and just non-CSR, but just pure fun team building that improves networking and camaraderie and teamwork inside a company. And that is, if you can keep it educational, there isn't a person in the world who doesn't want to learn. Everybody has a curious mind that's in a top-performing group. They, by definition, aren't there. They don't have a curious, sort of aggressive mind. And so if it can be kept educational, and the second is if it can be in an event that has a celebrity in it or a person they wouldn't otherwise meet, a professor or a broadcaster, a unique individual. And people tend to remember those kind of speakers and people they engage with. And I'll give you an example of an event we ran for a client. Because sharks are a threatened species, we worked with the University of Miami in tagging a shark, and we tagged it with the company's logo. And the tagging device traces the shark's activity for a year. And the contribution to do that goes to the University of Miami to sustain the studies of sharks. And so the corporation gets a thrill out of the fact they're helping the shark species survive. Everybody wins in this, right? They feel that they get to go out and tag the shark with the University of Miami, and they are able to watch the shark for a year online where it's swimming. And so that's the sustaining the value of the activity. And when this happened with one of our clients, the participants on the boat said this was the experience of a lifetime, and they will never forget it their entire life, being this close to a shark. And so it's a win-win-win when you can find something like that in your community that is a local event. That happened in Florida, right here where you all live. And so thinking through and finding what's the next best shark for our activities is always the thing that we have to be doing, because there's always something right around the corner like that, that where there's a need, and it's also fun and it's also life-changing to be able to do that.
And just to reiterate too, with this CSR event we did a few weeks ago, the tips from our panel from the CEO of Clean the World, Sean Zeitler, said same thing with an incentive program. Give them, communicate far enough out so people know what the CSR event's about and how it aligns to your mission. While you're there, do give metrics if you can. For instance, we cleaned 460 bars of soap, and we felt pretty darn good about that. And then, as you discussed, follow up with photos, whether it's from the village in Africa. I love this Red Cross idea. Send pictures afterwards of whatever you've left behind. Make sure that you, as the meeting organizer, along with your destination, along with your CSR partner, make sure that event lives year-long. And people remember, and that will make it more impactful as well. So I thought those are some pretty good tips. Let's move on to a couple of questions I had about the meaningful section. Steve, maybe you want to talk about this. I think the fact that changing destinations year after year certainly ranked high among our survey respondents. And I think the whole sort of decision-making process perhaps enters into this. How much influence does the qualifier or non-qualifier have? How much influence does the corporate stakeholder or management have? How much influence does an incentive company perhaps have to the ultimate decision of making that site selection?
Well, and that is probably the biggest element of making it meaningful. Will people work harder? Will people do more in order to achieve this? And it has to be something that is attractive to them. So I think the real purpose behind doing this study was to point up the necessity of focusing on the participants' needs. If we don't do that, we're going to end up just doing what we've always done. A good example we talked about a little bit earlier is, we had worked with one company for years and years. Their incentive was, we do the grand capitals of Europe for a seven-day trip. That's what we do. It's what we've always done. It works, etc. And that worked 20 years ago when the group that you were trying to appeal to was incredibly homogenous. It was 55-year-old males who were at the pinnacle of their career, and that's what they thought of as an incentive trip. Well, when we actually took a look at the participants that they're now trying to appeal to, that 55-year-old male was only 20% of the population out there, in this case, selling insurance. They had 20% of the population that were 35 to 40-year-old females who had young children at home, who looked at that grand European trip and said, I can't do it, so I have no interest. There was actually a really simple solution. For those people, in order to appeal, we need to give them a choice that made sense. A 4-night trip to Florida, inclusive of 2 children, was something that was incredibly meaningful to them. They said, absolutely, that's something that I will work harder for. So without that insight into what your base is that you're trying to appeal to, and without allowing them that input and the need for them to help make that decision, you're simply going to miss out on motivating the entire population and really maximizing the use of your dollars that you're putting against these incentives. I mean, another great example, we had a client where 2 cultures were coming together. It was essentially a merger in the telecommunications world. And we went out and did a similar study on those individuals who were participating. And we found out some very, very clear things. One, they didn't care to hear at all from the CEO on the stage. They really wanted to hear from the regional vice presidents, the people that signed their paychecks, that could influence their career trajectory, etc. And they didn't care what the destination was as long as it was close to a beach. So the trip had already been planned. The trip was in Salt Lake City. So what do we do? Okay, we can take part of the study, and what we did was we actually regionalized the event. We couldn't change the destination, but we regionalized the event. They spent a lot more time with their peers within region and gaining exposure to their regional leadership because that was so critical to them. The trip itself was chosen to go to Salt Lake City because the senior executive sponsor of this, his wife liked to ski. That's just not how we can make good decisions in this business and expect to get the right results. Yeah. So the power of the individual to help us shape this, it's only going to grow. It's only going to grow. Think about, the world right now, people they want a menu for everything. They want an interactive buying experience when they sign up for a conference. I'll take that, but not that. I mean, one size does not fit all. There is no average participant any longer. So we need to really take that into account as we're planning out the programs, choosing destinations, because that's such a powerful driver. And this is a way to do it. Focus on the people that you're trying to appeal to.
Yeah, and I think that the other thing, Steve, is that this is so easy to become actionable, right? I mean, it's not difficult to survey your participant audience and ask the question. And I think we would be surprised to find out how many times the participants aren't being asked. And so again, as professionals and practitioners in this space, that's the dialogue we should be having with our clients, because if we don't put it back to the participant to give us their point of view, there is the potential for this to become less and less relevant. And there are fun ways that you can do that. We have a client, for example, that at their annual sales meeting does a vote every year. So they create sort of a real fun montage of destination images, and they have a ballot box, and they let their audience kind of vote where the incentive program is going to be in the following year. And then they all they turn it into a little rivalry, and people feel like they have a stake in it and they have something to say, and they turn it into a fun announcement on their final night. So just there are ways that don't have to be, full-blown research, research to be able to just listen to the participants' feedback.
And I think that's a great point. This should not be an antiseptic subject.
Right.
We didn't get into this industry to be research scientists. This is a great industry to be in. Part of the reason I think all of our associates, our colleagues, the reason that we like this business so much is because we like each other so much. So we need to make this fun. Even the process of picking destinations, of putting the agendas together, this can be very collaborative and very fun, and it should be. This isn't an academic institution. This is a great industry, and let's listen to the people who have the right voice, the people that are closest to driving the performance for our companies.
Yeah.
And it's much easier to do today. It used to be a big deal to run a survey and gather the data, but now it can all be done with a mobile device. It can be done on the spot, and it's easy to gather data, but the key is get some data to make the decisions, because if you don't, you are guessing. And you are guessing anecdotally about what will work, about people. And so there's really no excuse. Right, it shouldn't be antiseptic, but there's no excuse not to have the voice of your customer, the voice of the participant involved in the decision making.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say this company has one incentive program a year and really has to pick one destination, but you're trying to appeal to those three very different demographics, perhaps. Sometimes there's still going to be that 55-year-old guy and that 35-year-old mother and that 25-year-old climbing up the ladder who wants to go to New Zealand and jump off a cliff or something. How do you design your program? And I think that also ties back to some of the other results, less mandatory group activities. How do you create a program then that would excite and motivate all three of those audiences into one program?
Well,
Yeah.
you kind of said it. I mean, it really is all about the programming. And I think if anything was a takeaway from this particular research, it's that one size does not fit all, right? We know that. We've known it all along, but now it's really just further validated. So there's a way to appeal to wide range of demographic regardless of the destination. So I think it goes back to you need to know your audience. And I think you do need to listen, and you do need to factor in that free time. And then it's all about the communication and communicating with them based on where their interests are, where their passions are, what they would like to experience, whether it has to do with culture or thrill-seeking or educating themselves. There's a way to build programming, and I love, Steve used the word kind of menu of choices. It really is going to be more and more about choice moving forward. And the standard program that includes sort of the set pattern of group tour and a dine around and those kinds of things are going to be there. It's going to morph, and we should be leading those changes versus going after it once we see fallout. So it really goes just to programming and understanding that you need to put forth the choice.
With a disparate audience, providing as much individualization and customization, individual choice in the middle is the way to go, with bookending it on the end with group activities.
Yep.
So that you get all of those elements that both sides want, which is some peer recognition, some meeting with the executives, beginning and end, and you bookend the experience with networking too. But in the middle, customization, choice, individualization, as much as you can afford, because the more offerings, right, the more expensive it can get, because it's difficult to deliver lots of activities. And of course, there are many things you can do that are free and low cost too. But in general, that's a good formula. You still have a group experience, but you have the individual in between.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point, Faye, just from a budget perspective. If we talked about trends, budgets are not exponentially increasing to run these programs year over year. And so I think it traditionally was held as a negative to build in time on own and have it be an unbudgeted part of the overall program. Portions of this study kind of say to the contrary, that there isn't as much negative perception around having that free time and maybe reaching into their own individual pocket in order to do what they want as you would think. One of the things I thought was interesting, and this is more US-centric, but there's long been a feeling that the tax implication of earning these trips was a negative. Actually, it wasn't as much of a negative as we thought. So I think, again, we're seeing that people are willing to take that middle portion of this trip just to do what's really important to me and aren't expecting it to be covered in programs. So I think that's going to become more of a reality, as well as budgets are going to remain to stay relatively stagnant.
I think the point about free time as being one of the most appealing parts of a program. Free time costs nothing.
Right.
Great thing. Now we can take a look at the budget that we would have put against a series of potentially expensive activities and find out where we can get bigger bang for our buck. It could be brand name or big name talent for the final night. It could be room gifts. It could be anything really. But these are all investment choices, and I don't think that we understand how much power we have to influence the design of these programs to make them more effective. It's really a matter of listening to the participant in order to get that right. So, I think the 25-year-old, the 35-year-old, the 55-year-old, it's easy to accommodate if we simply just, again, look from their perspective back to ours, and design the program with that in mind.
And isn't it key to design that program early enough on and show the variety to motivate these non-qualifiers in the survey? Didn't seem all that fired up by some of the incentives offered at their company, and I'm just wondering how far out can you, as a designer, program designer, show all these options to the potential qualifiers, and at what point does that happen?
So two good points around that. First, we need to look at these as these are not just campaigns. It's not 90 days, you hit, you earn, you go. This needs to be part of the culture of the company. This is just one thing, along with compensation, along with benefits, that we use as part of that pool of things to motivate increased performance. So we need to be communicating about this all the time. It just needs to be part of the culture in order to have the greatest effect. So whether it's the design of the program, whether it's the rules, whether it's the goals and how you're doing against them, or whether it's the end result, the award itself, it needs to be constantly brought up for the people who are participating. But then secondly, what we, as part of the survey, really wanted to understand was the change in attitudes between earners and non-earners, and we had great representation of both. So the methodology was we went out and looked at people over the past 6 years at that time that had participated and had earned at some point, but also in many cases had not earned each of those 6 years. So they felt they understood what it was like not to win that particular program. And honestly, what we found was somewhat surprising to me in that it did not turn off the non-earners. They did not hold terribly negative feelings towards those who did earn. So, one of the things that you're worried about when you do these programs is what's it going to do to the people who it doesn't appeal to. And in fact, we found out that it didn't have a negative implication on their performance. In fact, the attitudes or degree of motivation to earn the award between earners and non-earners was not statistically significantly different. So there wasn't a big turnoff as part of this. So again, as an industry, we're doing a pretty good job along that dimension.
Non-earners are really important because non-earners actually fund earners right to go, right? Because if you measure the increased volume in a company, a certain percent achieve, but others don't achieve, but they've helped contribute to increased performance, correct? And so how they're treated and how they're talked to in the entire process, as Steve said, is absolutely correct. And there are a lot of things to do to keep them engaged, even if they don't earn. One of them is that the local manager performs much more local on-the-spot recognition for them on an ongoing basis throughout their career and does a much, much better job of that. Another one is, especially in a company non-sales where you're a non-sales incentive, where you're nominated to go by someone, right? It hasn't been a sales quota. You, to achieve that nomination, you have to have done something. So nominees who don't actually get chosen to go are often overlooked. And nominees should be promoted continually on the company's website all year long, even if they didn't win the chance to go on the program. That keeps them engaged for future events. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, they can drop out in their thought process and think, I can never achieve this, right? And you know, Steve's right, the site research, 90% of the people said, oh, even if I didn't win, I'm still going to be engaged. But what about the 10% who do kind of mentally drop out? So thinking of ways to continually focus on non-earners, but very important people, because all employees are important, is another key part of the big scheme of motivational planning. And we often talk just about the travel execution in these forums, but that is a very huge piece. And thankfully, the site study addressed that piece and talked about it, because it often is overlooked.
I think I could ask a bunch more questions, but I want to make sure that the audience is engaged, and if there are any questions that you have about travel execution or any other types of questions, we welcome your input, and just please, though, you need to speak into the microphone. I have a second. Please. Go ahead.
I recognize this doesn't have much to do with the actual travel aspect of it, but in terms of performance, have there been any studies done on what happens to the performance of top performers once they reach the threshold? For example, because clearly there's a wide margin between who's on the incentive and who's the top performer, and who has just made it in. Do the top performers' performance, does it tail off once they reach the threshold? Or do they keep charging?
Well, this is going to vary depending on an individual corporation, and it depends on the construction of the program. Some corporations set out their sales targets, and people who achieve the target are eligible to go on the program. And if the target has been raised each year, year over year, then by definition, they've performed incrementally better than the year before. Right? As you all know, there's economic situations with certain companies and their products, wherever they are in the life cycle, where performance is mature, and the objective might be to sustain the current performance. And in that case, that might be a very good goal, because sustaining current performance in this environment is worthy. And so when you say, are there studies, there are, in general, of what I remember reading over the past is once top performers achieve, they're going to stay in that subset. They don't want to fall out because they enjoy the recognition, they enjoy the pay, they enjoy the awards, and they keep them motivated. But the question was, do they have to do better year after year? It may not be the case. They may have to just sustain performance and not lose accounts. So it depends on the company. That's why understanding the goals up front, whether you're in a company like ours where we help companies plan their goals, or you're on the delivery end where you're delivering to it, it's important, no matter where you are in that continuum, that you have some understanding of what those folks did to win it. Because I think you deliver better, and if you're fully aligned with what those folks did to get there. So it varies.
And I think that question it's a great one, and it really has to do with the design of the contest itself, the campaign itself. Your top performers, they're going to be your top performers year in, year out. They're doing it for pride. They're going to hit their numbers one way or the other, and you're going to, you want to make sure that you're getting the maximum performance for the entire compensation package that you're giving them, in addition to the incentive awards you're giving them. But what you also want to do is make sure that when you take a look at the people who are producing smaller amounts, potentially put them into competitive groups so that even if they hit 100% of their target and the other guy's hitting at 105, they know they have to get to 106 in order to earn. So it's really about structuring it the right way, and every culture for every company is going to be different, but you want to continue to drive incremental performance over and above what objectives are, and there's plenty of ways to do that just by designing the incentive campaign correctly.
Wait, another question?
You talked a lot about communication to your participants, and and at every aspect, communicating as far as about the destination, about the goal, about where they want to go. Do you have any data that says how they want to be communicated to? Is it a postcard in the mail? Is it a text message? Is it a Twitter, a tweet, Facebook?
Okay, our company has some data on that, on select accounts that have asked us to do those kinds of studies on their participants. And the answer is it's different depending on the company. If it's a global incentive and it's run in several theaters, there are consistent ways in which communication has to happen from the top, particularly on what the goals are, what it takes to qualify, and what the progressive steps are. And then by region and country, there may be different ways people want to be communicated with. In certain select ways, people in Japan may have different ways to be communicated with than others. But in general, what people need is consistent communication about where they stand and how they're doing and what their progress is. And they need consistent, clear communication on what they have to do to qualify. And companies that can have lukewarm attitudes, perhaps toward the contest, are those who don't consistently communicate that, or where the local managers are not in sync with the global managers. The local managers don't have enough information on the program. Because who do you go to if you're a participant in a global organization? You go to your local manager first, and you say, I don't understand what I have to do to win this. So, and it could be email. I don't know if it's tweeting too much, other than the pep talks of tweeting, keep going. But one very common method today are employee portals, where employees can sign in, and they can not only see their incentive award, they can see the rules, they can see their thermometer of where they are, their progress report. They can get tips from their managers on what to do differently to achieve, and these are becoming popular because they're cost effective and they're easy for management to update, right? It's all online. So, and still, emails are common, and emails are still effective. Less so social networking yet, less so through LinkedIn and Facebook and things like that, but that's coming, where Facebook and LinkedIn will be bigger communicators of company strategies. We already know lots of marketing activities happening in those elements. So, yes, you wanted to ask a follow-up. I may not be answering your question.
No. To take it a little further, our technology is growing so rapidly, and it's going mobile, iPads and iPhones and Droid telephones and so forth. Do you find that companies are now creating apps or for the specific event, and maybe that's how they communicate throughout the whole year and even after, to follow the tag Shark through a mobile device?
Yes, and yes to all of that. Companies are doing that on a different scale. Some are doing online sites, and they're not mobile yet, but many are moving to mobile devices because people want to stand in the security line at the airport and check their status. It's convenient. So whatever's convenient, and if apps are convenient, apps are a little less real-time, as you know, than your mobile device signing right into a site. But it is all coming that way.
And just to reinforce what Faye said, I think if there are two things around communication that should be a consistent message is, number one, it's about frequency. It's about a consistent, frequent message. The media can be mixed, but it's the frequency of the message. And then it's back to kind of what we're talking about today. It's about understanding your participants and what's the way in which they want to engage. Do they want to engage on their mobile device? Do they want something mailed to their home? Do they want to go online and sign in? It's about understanding your audience. So I think those are the two keys that will always and should always drive a communication campaign.
And I think just to add to that, each vertical is going to have a different level of adoption of new technologies. Certainly technology companies that are trying to communicate and track progress, et cetera, very easy for them to get on board with an app that they can use or part of a dashboard that they use consistently for other performance measures. Probably less so in the automotive world. 15 years ago, we couldn't get an automotive dealer to even go into a website to sign up. He still wanted to fax his forms in for everything. But really, we've seen that adoption even occur there, which has been great. Now you can go out to a handful of our clients, and the dealer on his iPhone will be able to click into an app and figure out what he's doing as far as the spring dealer incentive, how many more vehicles he needs to move, how he's doing in his competitive group. A day that I knew would come, but they denied that it would. So, again, it's going to be, the communication is going to be different by client and by probably vertical. And again, the participants at the center of that. Find out how they want to be communicated to, and it's really cheap. It's a lot cheaper than it used to be when we'd be faxing out individual reports on a weekly basis. So the opportunity is really there to tailor this to any audience.
And the last point on that is the user experience has to be really positive and friendly. If you're going to go mobile and they say they want mobile, then you better design the application so it's easy to use, or they won't use it and request another form of communication. And so it's got to be a really nice customer experience, as you all want when you use any kind of technology, right?
One of our biggest challenges today is budget, and especially for the participant in the company where there has been certain expectations on previous programs. Today, airline taxes, hotels with resort fees and all sorts of things are taking up a lot of the budget. So therefore, when you want to maintain the same element of how do you achieve this when all of a sudden there's so many elements that are really taking up the space of the budget?
Well, I can I think we've touched on it a little bit. Faye's comment earlier about just program design, and I think what you ultimately need to do is look at impact. And we have clients, and I see anecdotally in our industry, one or two sort of really impactful, well-done events, and then we've heard through this survey and consistently here, then build in the free time and those kinds of things. But you're right, your point is absolutely spot on. Aspects of the budget have been exponentially, the pie is being sliced differently now, right, from a budget perspective because of some of the increased costs of travel and transportation and regulatory considerations. So I think it's back to us as practitioners in this space to say, hey, we've heard that participants want the unique once-in-a-lifetime type experiences, and you just really drive towards delivering one or two events versus recreating that on a daily basis. But I don't think we can ever lose sight of the fact that we have to keep the key tenets of the program from the surprise and delight, memorable experiences. That needs to be a part of it. And then I think you just ultimately kind of do some things that don't, that are low cost, yet still make the participant feel special. And there are a lot of ways. We all have, we could go around the room and share our ideas there.
I'm going to give you one very specific tip that I think is often overlooked in budgeting, and that is taxation, local taxation. If you take the top 50 cities in the United States and apply the local taxes to food and beverage, car rental, which are often used on programs, and airport fees and things that are local in nature, you will find an amazing difference, and you will find on a large program a savings of hundreds of thousands of dollars if you avoid certain cities. I'm very happy to say Florida has one of the lowest tax structures, and so does California in the country, on not applying these local taxes. But the cities that are building stadiums are applying incremental taxation to inbound visitors, including incentive groups. Some of it is very large. So in addition to the hotel and motel tax, there are city taxes, there are a series of taxes. And so when quotes are being established for incentive programs, you often look at room rate, and you look at transport air and the taxes, but often those local taxes are not really studied enough. And it is a great way to save and choose cities that choose to tax their inbound travelers less than other cities do. And it can save you quite a bit of money.
How are we on time, Francis? Do you have any more questions? Or? 5. Oh, great. Please.
Hi, everybody. I'm very much enjoying your presentation. My name is Lindsay. I'm with Salamander Hotels and Resorts. And we've spoken a lot today about how you communicate with your clients. Well, I'm in a situation where I've just joined the company. How do we communicate as a hotel company, as a small hotel company? How do we communicate with you folk? I have a list of all of my accounts and everything, and is it, coming into your offices? Fortunately, I'm blessed that I am coming into your offices in June, but all of your people are so busy, emails. Has it gone back to sending you letters, postcards? What's the best way we can get our message out about our, in my case, specifically hotels? How do we reach you folk so that we can make an impression?
Absolutely. So first, let me say that you're doing that right now. Mm-hmm. You're showing up at this event. Site is something that all of our companies support strongly. So all of you guys for being here, one, we thank you for your support of Site, but two, it's the best interaction you could possibly have with our 3 companies because we're going to know your face, we're going to be supportive of you, we're developing that relationship, we're in the business of face-to-face meetings. So being here, participating in Site and Site events is a critical way for you to show up differently from your competition. This is incredibly valuable time that you and your company are investing for you. In addition to that, I think I still believe that, I haven't done this, you guys may have done this, but after visits we have to our offices, whether it's St. Louis or Philadelphia or now Twinsburg, you name it, there is a spike in activity that is generated to the suppliers because it's top of mind. The next RFP that comes in, the renewal for that one particular client, it's simply top of mind. We remember, I remember the value proposition you just shared with me. How can I include that because it's new, it's different? It is a big investment for us. I'll say, if we were to open the doors, we could have morning and afternoon visits 5 days a week. Mm-hmm. We simply can't afford to do that because we have to be productive as well. So when you do come in, make sure that you've got a sharp value proposition, you've done your homework, what is kind of coming up that your particular product can appeal to. But I do think that arranging that time of face-to-face is still critically valuable to us to feel connected to you, your brand, and what it is that you guys offer.
But just as a follow-up to that, so we've made our presentation to your buyers and so forth. How do we then stay in communication with them? Because obviously we can't come in there too often. You wouldn't want to see us. Do we send emails to the industry relations people to then send out to the buyers and so forth? Or
So I can answer that from my company. It might be different, but that's absolutely, I can't take any more emails, so it's not going to be effective. And our people are the same way. I've religiously unsubscribe. But what you can do is go in through, in our case in particular, through industry relations, and they're the funnel. They're the people that put it out onto our intranet site, any deals, any offers, any updates that you have to your information. So that's the right point of contact within the Maritz travel organization.
Do
Yeah.
updates still work, for instance? I mean,
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. I would also say two things. If your contact can be experiential and relevant, and so here's what I mean by that. We're definitely open to the kind of face-to-face meetings that Steve referenced, but if you partner with another supplier, one of the more effective ways is coming in with a DMC that may be active in your destination so that you're actually able to present an experience versus a product. And I think if you can help to really create that, that's a really good takeaway, and I think it's easier for buyers to then translate your message into which of my clients is this going to be relevant for. And then secondly, I say make it relevant and do your homework. Understand who my key accounts are, understand it in advance what types of programs we run. Your product's not going to probably be for all of my customers. Understand which customers we can talk to really specifically, and that's just doing your homework. But there isn't anyone I don't think in any of our companies that isn't challenged on a daily basis to come forward with new ideas and great products and great suggestions for our clients. And so if you can be our partner in that by helping to create the experience and making it really relevant, then I think that you're noticed.
Yeah. At AIMIA, we're organized by subject matter expertise. So we like to fit you with the experts on the area. And then when you come, what we'd like to have you do is tell us how you fit with the whole area. Because products aren't sold in isolation. It's usually a collective experience for the area. So we very much like regional approaches where people come together and complement each other. And it's a little bit easier to remember than, like everyone else. We have about 2,400 registered, approved suppliers around the world that we try to see and communicate with. If you're unregistered, it means you're sort of not cleared yet, or we don't know much about you or your insurance and all of the ways we vet you. But we do that to protect you and the customers and the clients and make sure that we have people in the system that we can readily quote without having to do a lot of further round checking. So it's a process, and we welcome new people. We welcome new product. I agree with the other panelists that the sharper your product focus, the easier it is to come through. If your product focus is fuzzy, it is harder to remember and get you to the top of the mind. So to spend time in your company and with your marketing folks, and you may be the marketing individual, to sharpen your offering so that we can apply it correctly and fit it with the right kind of client. Because the clients are all different. They have different needs, and somewhere there's somebody who needs you, right? And it's for us, it's finding that match.
I'd also be remiss if I didn't just mention another really good way, and I know all of our companies take advantage of the key hosted buyer events, the key hosted buyer trade shows, so that, and many of them are strategic partners for site as well. So the Reed show, the IMEX shows, Incentive Travel Exchange. Typically, you talk about people's ability to really always take an appointment. Most of our companies invest in our people attending those events because it's a really great forum for them to be able to learn a lot and have face-to-face meetings. So don't overlook the opportunity to participate in any of those hosted buyer events.
And on that note, I think we'll finish our panel, and we want to thank our panelists. They were fantastic.